Hello, fellow nerds, geeks, and supporters of indie pop culture creators. Aaron Nabus here, and welcome to the Hall H Show. On this episode, we're happy to chat with writer, actor, and director Clay Adams. You might know him for his voice acting work on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Fast Forward, and also several seasons of Yugioh. He was last on back in October of 2020 on episode 99, where he and David Schrader talked about their horror-themed comic book anthology, Nightmare Theater. He's back to talk about one of his own projects, a comic book, PBOW, World War Bitch 1 and 2. It's a grindhouse action comedy sequel to Pregnant Bitches of War. It's basically a dystopian sci-fi for mature readers. That's basically the Handmaid's Tale meets Kill Bill. I'm excited to welcome Clay Adams back to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Before we started the podcast, we were talking a little bit, and you live in Arkansas right now, and we were just talking about how you said it's the place you're living in is where Walmart is, and that it's known for their I guess bike riding culture. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's a big biking mecca. In fact, when we came to check out the town to see if we wanted to live there, we stopped off in a local bar, and we were sitting there, and I was chatting with everybody that I could talk to, just to be like, hey, should we move here? Do you like it here? And literally every single person in the bar was like, oh, we don't live here. We just came here to bike the trails. So we were talking to people from Maine and Washington, and I mean, literally all over the world. People in that bar just, I don't know. It's it's a thing. It's the huge biking mecca here.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
I had no idea either. And they've got, because it's Walmart and they're trying to attract people, to kind of live here. They've built, there's Crystal Bridges Museum. So it's a world-class art museum they've got here, just kind of in the middle of downtown. And all the parking is free for everything because Walmart pays for it. The museum's free. They're really they're really trying to attract people. So they made it's a nice place, I gotta say. I wasn't super thrilled about moving. I lived in New York for 15 years. I lived in Atlanta for most of my life. And I wasn't super thrilled about moving, but it's actually pretty great here.
Nice. Well, that's good to hear. Why don't we just get right into it? Your Kickstarter was successfully funded, but I think it's important that we still get eyes on this and help you finish strong. Here's the basic pitch for PBOW World War Bitch 1 and 2. Quote, plucked from the time stream by mad scientist Nikola Tesla, 6 pregnant women accidentally kill a young Hitler and unleash a nightmare future. Now, hunted by the exalted father, and with Tesla acting as Charlie to their angels, they must save the world from a hell of their own creation before their water breaks. If you thought Volume 1 was nuts, you ain't seen nothing yet. And my first question, what kind of drugs were you on when you came up with this idea?
Really, really good ones. Really, really good ones. Yeah, so... It's definitely a different concept, but we wanted to make something kind of grindhouse, and we wanted, so the idea kind of unfolded, honestly, I was a new parent, and as most new parents are, kind of worried about the world that you're bringing your kids into. And so really kind of everything I was writing at that time was really based around that. So I wanted to, and this is co-written with Alexandre Philippe, who has co-written all the stuff that I've done with Fried Comics. He and I were kind of chatting, and we wanted to do something grindhouse, something kind of Tarantino-esque. and also something that kind of like captured that vibe of the comics that we loved, like Preacher. That's something that we had like really bonded over. And and we were writing another book that had like a subplot with some pregnant women who get their hands on some guns and really kind of kick ass and take names. And we just started, we were like, oh my God, this should be like our next book. It should be Pregnant Bitches of War. And we just started cracking up at how, like, what a terrible title that was. And then we were like, you know what? Wait a minute. What if we could actually make this into something something interesting? So then we started kind of thinking about like the time travel aspect of it, and of course how everybody, you know, there's always that question of like, if you could go back in time and kill a young Hitler, would you do it? And and sort of the take that we decided to take on that is like, you know, the butterfly effect. Like everything has ripples that, like, even though you might think that would be a good idea, to rid the world of a monster. What if you rid the world of a monster and there was an even worse monster waiting to take his place? Right now that guy's out of the way. And so we kind of built the world out from there. So these women go back in time. They accidentally kill a young Hitler. It's like sort of on purpose, but sort of not. They're trying not to mess up the time stream continuum, but somebody just can't help themselves. And so then that makes time go crazy. And when they come back to their, you know, when they think they're traveling back to their, you know, normal time period, they arrive in this dystopian future that has been totally taken over by this crazy dictator called the Exalted Father, which is, you know, on purposeful that the bad guy is dad, for lack of a better word. Like I said, I was very concerned about the world I was bringing my kids into. I was very concerned about any sort of negative effects I might have on them. So I guess if you want to like look deep, you know, I guess I'm kind of working out my issues with being a father here. But,
So I'm curious. You wrote the first one, I guess, when your wife just gave birth. Now, this next set of stories, I mean, did you just have another child?
yeah, well, not recently, but what happened was I was a new father when we wrote the first volume, and that was, you know, maybe a little more than a decade ago when we came up with the story and we started making the comic. And then we published it online. The first volume we published online in 2013, 2014. And something weird happened. Like it would get good reviews, and you know, for an indie comic, we felt like it was doing well. But then we sort of started to notice that like the book was heavily pirated. And then, you know, it would still sell on Comixology. Like we weren't promoting it, but it would still sell. And we'd just be asked questions about this book. And, you know, when was there going to be more? And one day I was just looking on my computer because I was thinking, well, I don't know that there's going to be more. Like my co-writer has kind of moved on. He does documentary films. And I was like, you know, I don't know that there's really going to be more. And then I somehow I was going through files. I'm cleaning out my computer, and I found where we had outlined an entire second volume. And it was a super detailed outline. And in fact, had an even more detailed outline for the first issue, including like we had written some script pages. And like, I don't remember writing this stuff at all, but it was like, it was just there. And it felt like it was a gift, you know, that, okay, well, wait a minute. We can keep going with this. Like we've already plotted it out. We've already kind of broken down the first issue. I can kind of break down the other issues. And things just sort of started falling into place. Like, you know, not obviously this last year has been terrible for many reasons that, you know, I don't think we have to dwell on. I think we all know. One of the positives has been that that Alexander, my co-writer, and I were able to connect more frequently. because he wasn't going off, traveling the world with his documentary films and shooting constantly. He suddenly found himself with more time, so we were able to talk more. We were able to break down the issues together, and really and truly collaborate in a way that I didn't necessarily think was going to be possible when I decided to bring this new volume to Kickstarter.
Mm.
But it really, everything has kind of worked out, and we've got a brand new art team that is just killing it, and yeah, it's going well.
And how did you and Alexander first meet up?
We were both students at NYU, in the dramatic writing program. And I remember I remember seeing him and talking to him, and he's Swiss French, and he always would come to class like in like with a sports jacket and like all dressed up, and like he invited some students over to his studio apartment to have a party, and like I got there and it was like a wine and cheese tasting. And I was like, oh, what a sophisticated European. And then I got to know him better, and and realized that, boy, was I wrong. He has the same sort of lowbrow tastes, I guess, that I do. But yeah, we just we hit it off. We bonded over Preacher comics, and he would show me, like, I remember he introduced me to Twin Peaks. I'd kind of missed the boat on that. So I remember watching the pilot at his apartment. And so we just hit it off and bonded, and once school was over, just started collaborating, writing some stuff. And here we are a bajillion years later, still writing together.
That's incredible. Wow, I haven't watched Twin Peaks in such a long time.
I know. I got to go revisit that.
You got me craving some cherry pie and coffee.
It's a good craving to have.
Yeah. Now walk me through why you thought Nikola Tesla would be a good Charlie for the 6 pregnant angels.
Yeah. I don't know exactly how we came up with that. It just sort of felt like it feels like he's everywhere now. When we came up with it, that wasn't quite the case, but we were definitely interested in sort of this rivalry between Tesla and Edison, whether or not that's been blown all out of proportion or not. We were interested in exploring it. And in fact, Edison plays a very big role in this new volume. He's a very, very key player in everything that's going to happen. So yeah, we really wanted to play up that kind of rivalry, and we thought, Tesla. I think when we started doing the research, we discovered that he had certain beliefs, and he was very strict in those beliefs, and one of the things is that he really he believed that women would rule the world one day, like that was inevitable. And we thought, well, that's kind of interesting if he's if he's gonna bring this what he thinks is this elite fighting force to come save the day, that they would be all women, and so I guess it sort of came out of that. And there were there were like other things too that we felt like just sort of made Tesla perfect for this, and some of those may be lost in the haze of time, but yeah, it just once we started going into the research of who Tesla was and what he believed, and some of the crazy things that happened around him, we were like, yeah, this is kind of the perfect Charlie to their angels.
Would you like to sort of also talk about the rest of your creative team?
Yeah, for sure. So the artist, the art team, I'm going to slaughter their names, and you have to forgive me. I Americanize them. They're Italian. artists. I can easily Americanize their names and say it fine, but I feel like I have to like really do it justice because they mock me when I do that. They make fun of me. So then I have to put on like a phony Italian accent to like really say the names. So it's Fabio Ramacci.
I think you
And
broke. I think the internet couldn't handle that. So can you say that again?
did I break the internet? Here we go. Fabio Ramacci.
There you go.
And the colorist Ilaria Chiocca. Something like that. Something like that. Forgive me if you're Italian. Please forgive me. Know that Fabio and Ilaria are laughing at me right now, listening to this. They're probably laughing in Italy right now, and they don't even know why. They love it when I slaughter their names. So anyway, we discovered them. We were doing another book called Red Xmas, which has since been picked up by Scout Comics, and we were working on that. We had started the first issue with another artist, and then unfortunately he had to leave the project. So we wanted to try to find somebody that sort of worked in that style. So I put out a call on Reddit, Comic Collabs, and started getting all these fantastic submissions. But this one guy wrote in and he was like, look, I'm going to be honest with you. My style is nothing like this other guy's, but this book, your description of it, like this is exactly the kind of stuff I want to draw. This sounds fun. This sounds right up my alley. He said, how about this? Can I draw you a test page for free? If you like it, we'll use it. That'll be the first page. And then I'll just keep going. If you don't like it, well, then you got a free test page, from me. Enjoy. And I said, all right, you know what? I like this. I like that this guy seems enthusiastic about it. And then he turned in the page and it was phenomenal. Like it just totally blew me away. And then he was friends with Ilaria, so he brought her on to do the coloring. And they're an incredible team that just gets better every time I see something from them. We just finished up Red Xmas, and that looks gorgeous. They've done 2 issues now of PBOW, and it's just like I said, each thing I see from them is better than the last. And Fabio's clearly having a blast drawing this nutty stuff. And Ilaria's looking like she's having fun coloring it. And they just sort of take this crazy stuff that we send them and somehow make it better. So we're thrilled to have them.
Nice. Why don't we go ahead and talk about your Kickstarter campaign? There's a lot that you offer. I mean, yeah. Especially for myself, and I'm sure a lot of our audience members who haven't heard about it before. I mean, we'll have a chance to get caught up on the story.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we wanted to make it simple for people to catch up because we do have volume 1, which was 5 issues, and then now we have 2 issues of volume 2, and we wanted to make sure that you could get everything you needed to get caught up. So we've got digital catch-up tiers, we have print catch-up tiers, and if you only want volume 2, which we did try to make new reader friendly, we tried to sort of get you up to speed so that you can just start with volume 2 if you wanted to do that. But if you want the whole story, then you get a bigger experience. You can do that too. So we've got digital catch-up tiers for each volume. We've got print catch-up tiers for each volume. We've got variant covers and a quote-unquote virgin cover. I say quote unquote because all the women are pregnant. But it's our regular cover is a wraparound cover because I really used to love those epic wraparound covers that they used to do on Special Comics. And since we didn't get an issue out last year because of the pandemic, we wanted to make this issue like really special. So we did an epic wraparound cover. You can get that in the standard edition or the quote unquote virgin edition, which just means it doesn't have any logos or writing on it. It's just the art. And then we have a Bond homage variant, which is based on the Man with the Golden Gun. except ours is the man with the metal dick. And that is a reference to a very important character who makes their very first appearance in this issue. The man with the metal dick. That's so the Exalted Father last issue, he heard a prophecy about this war that's going to happen with the PBOWs and the dead rising and all this stuff, this whole big great prophecy. And then one piece of it was that the man with the metal dick will betray you. And this is the first appearance of the man with the metal dick here in this issue. And anyway, we did Tony Donnelly, who does Albert Einstein Time Mason, and Fabiana Mascolo, who does Firefly. They did this cover. Tony drew it. Fabiana colored it. And they did an homage to the man with the golden gun, James Bond poster. And it's just hilarious. They did an amazing job subbing in our characters for all the Bond people.
Yeah, it looks great.
So we've got that for you too. That's one that's pretty cool.
I guess still talking about Kickstarter. Carla Nappi mentioned that you help her with her Kickstarter campaigns. What are some helpful tips to help ensure a successful Kickstarter?
So the biggest thing, I mean, the biggest thing, there are several biggest things, I guess. But I guess the first thing I would say is do your research, know what you're getting into. And there are a ton of great free resources out there, but Tyler James has a free podcast he does called Comics Launch, where he talks about tips and tricks for doing Kickstarter. He also offers a course you can take and communities you can join. So I really recommend doing your research and just knowing what it's like going into it, because it can be a ride. It can be a roller coaster. The other tip I would say is that you kind of have to bring the crowd. It's crowdfunding, yeah, and there are people on Kickstarter that are just looking to help out projects, but you have to bring the crowd to begin with on day 1, on day 2, on day 3. And then once people see that there's a little bit of support for this thing, then, strangers will start jumping on. But I think the biggest problem a lot of people get into is that they just kind of say, oh, well, you know what? I'll just throw this up and put it on Kickstarter and I'll see, who buys it. And unfortunately, people don't start paying attention to it until they see, quite a lot of backing. And you've got to be responsible for that. So you can grow your fan base. A lot of people have a mailing list that they write to, that they let people know about the Kickstarter coming up. You got to let friends and family know. And then once once you get going, then you'll start getting those bites from other people.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned you sort of have to bring the crowd on day 1. Obviously, you've been sort of growing your crowd for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
I think Fried Comics was founded in 2013.
Yep.
Can you talk to me about why you started Fried Comics in the first place?
Yeah. So we wanted to, basically just do our own thing. I mean, we saw that the internet was becoming a real place where you could viably sell your work. And, I think the mistake that a lot of people make in the arts, and I say this both as somebody who's seen it from the acting side and then someone who's also seeing it from the writing side. But a big mistake that people make is that they sort of think that everybody's out there waiting just to discover you. Everybody, people in power have all this money, right? That they're just waiting to find you and throw that money at you so that you can be the next superstar. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. Nobody's really looking to do that. And so the people, in my observation, that have been the most successful are the people that just kind of go out and make it happen. Whether that's Sylvester Stallone writing Rocky, as a starring vehicle for himself, and then getting that movie made, right? Or Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, or, whatever. There's a reason why, all of the actors that you still see doing things today, the big names, they all have their own production company. Reese Witherspoon is not sitting around waiting for somebody to come to her with the perfect Reese Witherspoon vehicle. She's actively reading books constantly, right? And optioning things that she could be either star in or she could produce. And that I think is really instructive because, it's so easy to think that somebody like her or, Brad Pitt or whatever, that these people are superstars and they don't need to do that. But the reality is that they're superstars because they did that, that's how they keep their careers going. And so we knew that nobody, we could send around pitches. We could try to get, somebody to get behind this thing, or we could just make it and put it out there. And especially something, as like a crazy idea like this, it's maybe not always the most natural pitch or natural sell, when we thought like, we don't want to be sitting around waiting for a gatekeeper to approve this because they're probably not. So why not just, we'll raise the funds ourselves. We'll make the comic and we'll put it out there and we'll see what happens. And, when we launched Fried Comics, we didn't, we didn't really know what we were doing. How I said with Kickstarter, you should do the research. We did not necessarily do that when we launched Fried Comics. So what we did initially was we got the website and we just started putting it up as a webcomic on the website. But we didn't know anything about how to drive traffic. We did have a mailing list, but we didn't really know what to do with it or how to use it properly. And so it was all kind of learning on the fly. And we put out 5 issues and lost a lot of money because we thought we were gonna become bajillionaires by putting up 99-cent downloads on our website. So, you can read it for free on the website, or you can just go ahead and pay us 99 cents and we'll send you, the whole thing at once. And it very quickly became apparent that we had to reach a crap ton of people to make any money selling 99-cent downloads. So after that happened, that's kind of when we started hearing about Kickstarter and like, oh, maybe we should take something to Kickstarter. And probably what we should have done is take PBOW to Kickstarter to begin with, because we had sort of built up that fan base and we had only sold downloads. So it probably would have made sense to do like a trade edition. But instead we did Red Xmas because that was something else we had promised people was coming. And so we said, rather than do this on our website, let's take this to Kickstarter. And we set a relatively low goal for our first Kickstarter and got about halfway through it. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. We are going to fail. And I got to figure out like how to run a Kickstarter like yesterday. So at that point, like I Googled, how do you run a comics Kickstarter? And what came up was Comics Tribe blog by Tyler James, who I mentioned earlier. And I read every single blog post he wrote about how to run a Kickstarter. I implemented every single piece of advice that he gave, and lo and behold, we funded. And like that was a huge turning point for me. It was a lot of work and a lot of effort to get it going for a relatively small amount of money, but we still paid for the creation of the book. And that was huge. And it was kind of at that point that I started, I guess I got on Tyler's email list because shortly after that, he sent something saying he was opening up a course on how to run a mailing list and build your audience. So I signed up for that. It was like the beta version, so it was very inexpensive. And I signed up for that and started sending out the email list. And just watching those numbers grow and people, and I really enjoyed writing the emails. And so then it became a point where, okay, we need to launch them something else. So we launched a trade of PBOW because we needed money to then continue Red Xmas. So so we launched the trade, and that funded, and so that put some money in our pockets, and we launched another thing using some public domain art. So that didn't cost us anything. So we were able to kind of build up our coffers so that we could then pay for some art to continue Red Xmas. And so then like each Kickstarter has kind of grown off of the last, and each book is kind of built like its own audience. And you know, some of them crossovers, like we have some people who only read PBOW, like we have some people who only read the other stuff. Like, so there is, you know, there's some crossover, but then there are some people that are definitely like in their camps, but we see progress every time. Like, so for this creative team for PBOW, like this campaign is like far and away going to be the best one, you know? So we see progress each time out. And that's encouraging, and that keeps us going. And yeah, we just like entertaining people. So I've talked so long, I don't even know what the original question was. So I hope to God I answered it.
Well, you know, we touched on Kickstarter, and then also asked you about the start of Fried Comics. Like,
right.
why did you start it in the first place? What was your motivation behind it? So, I think you answered pretty well. I guess one thing I want to sort of dive deeper is, you know, the last time we had you on, I asked you, you know, what's something that your fans would be surprised to know about you, and then you answered something along the lines that, you know, I'm normal. So I guess I sort of want to dive into that, the juxtaposition
Sure.
of you being normal, and then like Fried Comics producing these offbeat, irreverent, you know, pulp fiction that's just, you know,
Yeah.
out of this world. So, you know, I'm curious about that.
Maybe that's how I work out my issues. Like, I don't know. It's funny. Like, I went into a few years ago, when I was still living in Atlanta, I went into the comic shop, and the guy who works there saw me, and he's like, "Oh, hey Clay, let me get your pull list." And as he was pulling out my comics, he goes, "You know, it's funny. I was Googling the other day, and I came across a comic book writer that has your name." And I was like, "Well, maybe it's me. What was the name of the book?" And he looked around for a second, and then he was like, "Pregnant," and I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And he took a beat, and he stared at me, and he goes, "But you seem so normal." And the woman, there was a woman at the counter, and she laughed, and she said, "You know, well, maybe, you know, maybe that's why. Maybe he gets it all out in his comic books." I don't know. I've always just had a twisted sense of humor, and like I liked, you know, I grew up on Mad Magazine and Looney Tunes cartoons and Roald Dahl, and you know, all these sort of offbeat things that I guess warped my mind. Um, and like one of the things that I always remember is I had a book called Murder for Christmas. And it was a collection of short stories, I think from, you know, everyone from Agatha Christie to Woody Allen to, you know, a bunch of other people. Um, but I don't remember anything about these short stories. And they were all like murder mysteries set at Christmas time. I don't remember anything about the stories. But what I remember was that each story, like in between each story, was a cartoon from Gahan Wilson. And I hope I'm saying this guy's name correctly. He was a sadly departed now cartoonist. He died just a few years ago, but he was a veteran of New Yorker and Playboy, and his cartoons were just so delightfully cracked. One that really stuck with me was there were these two chimney sweeps talking to a little old lady, and they're standing by her fireplace. And at the bottom of the fireplace is this like old, rotten, desiccated corpse in a Santa suit. And one of the chimney sweeps is saying, you know, "Well, we finally figured out what's been clogging up your chimney since last December," you know. And like that was hilarious to me as a kid. And that, I think, you know, that was probably the genesis of Red Xmas, where that whole book came from. I think can be traced directly to that cartoon. but that's the kind of stuff that made me laugh. And I don't, I like, I know that I like offbeat stuff. I know that I react to some stuff that other people might be, horrified that you laugh at. But I think that like that's a very human thing, that we kind of have to laugh at these horrible things as a way of coping with them. And it's like when people laugh at funerals, that it's not necessarily because they're disrespecting the dead. It's that like there's this uncomfortability, and that the way people deal with sometimes the uncomfortability of life is with humor. And so we that's kind of like what we wanted to do with Fried, is sort of have that same kind of sensibility, that it's going to be over the top action, it's going to be humor, it's going to be offbeat humor. And sometimes that lands, sometimes it doesn't. Um, but I think there are an awful lot of people that like that kind of thing, because like Mad and Cracked and Looney Tunes, like all those things were very huge. I mean, that was sort of mainstream pop culture for a very long time, despite all the people that sort of like wagged their fingers and said, this is going to rot your brain. I think you can still be a normal human being and function in life and raise a family and teach people how to be good people, and still have a good sense of humor about things.
Definitely, I agree. Um, Now, when you're telling me about your beginnings of Fried Comics, um, and your success on Kickstarter, eventual success, the keyword that you used was progress, and now you're progressing with one of your other titles, Red Xmas, with your new
Mhm.
association with Scout Comics. How did that come about?
So I actually met Charlie Stickney, who's the co-publisher of Scout. I met him during our second Kickstarter, which was for the PBOW trade paperback. And I had, he launched White Ash at the very same time, and I reached out to him um, sometime during the campaign. I had seen his project. I thought it looked cool, so I just mentioned it in one of the updates and just said, hey, I think this is a cool project. So I wrote to him and just said, hey, you don't know me. I just wanted you to know I thought your project was really cool. I shared it with my backers. I hope they check it out. And he wrote back, and he had checked out the page, and he was like, yeah, your project looks cool. I just backed it. I don't know. I'm not gonna share it because I don't know how my backers would feel about a project called Pregnant Bitches of War. But there may not be some crossover there. But he was like, but it's cool, like I backed it. And we chatted and just got friendly. We've been friends ever since. And he if you've been paying attention at all to Kickstarter, he's had wild, enormous success with White Ash, and brought that to Scout. And I think one day we were just chatting, and I was like, hey, who would I talk to about at Scout about maybe having Red Xmas published there? And he was like, well, funny you should mention it. I was just named an editor there. So I was like, well, can I just pass the pitch along to you? And he said, yeah, that's fine. And he's like, in the time since, he's become co-publisher, so he's really kind of moved up the ranks there. And the response to the book was great, and they put it on their schedule. So they released the first issue last year, and they're doing it as part of what they're calling their nonstop initiative. This is where they release a first issue, and then they go straight to trade. And part of that is because what they've learned is that, and not just for indie companies, this is like for the bigger companies too. It's the number one that's the big seller. And then sales kind of trickle off from there until the trade. So they're kind of like, well, why don't we just cut out the middle part? We'll have a great selling first issue and a great selling trade. And like, that's the package we're going to put out there. So, and I think that's perfect for Red Xmas because it is a Christmas book. So I think it's kind of hard to like, how do you sell, you know, I can understand if the first issue goes on sale in December, but how do you sell a Christmas book after Christmas? You know, I think there was some concern from retailers with that, and rightfully so. So the first issue came out last Christmas. The trade is going to come out this Christmas, and yeah, we've been really happy. It's been a great association, and the first issue did really well, and we're just really super excited to see where the trade goes from there. But I tell people, like, you know, make friends. Like, there are so many people in this business that are looking for transactional things, and you know, you can kind of tell they're sort of drive-bys. They want what's in it for them, and not really interested in you. And I always tell people, like, just make friends, because one, like, you need friends in this world, but two, like, that's your network. Like, stop worrying about the people, you know, so many steps above you who are gonna be these gatekeepers that magically throw you money. Like, it's the people to your left and to your right. That's your network, and those people are going to go places, and you'll go places together. And you know, when you're in a position to help them, you can help them, and when they're in a position to help you, they can help you. But it really does pay to have friends. And if I had never sent Charlie that email, who knows what would have happened. So anyway, I'm very thankful to Charlie and everybody at Scout for taking a chance on our little crazy book.
Nice. Yeah, Charlie's awesome.
Yeah, he's a great dude.
You're not only making comics, but you also act, direct, and write other material.
Yeah.
What is a typical day like for you, especially when you're raising a family?
I would say there probably isn't a typical day. It's kind of all over the map. I generally try to wake up, though. Like, I wake up pretty early, and I generally like to get started doing some kind of relatively brainless task first thing in the morning with my coffee. So I will, I'll letter a comic book. I letter all the fried comic stuff. Or I also, you know, I professionally letter for other people. So I will, I'll usually do some lettering with my coffee, something I don't have to think about too much. And then after that, I'll kind of wake up a little bit more, get dressed for the day, get ready for the day. And then, depending on what I have going on, you know, like if there's a voiceover session or something like that, you know, that kind of determines how the rest of my day is going to play out. If I don't have anything like that going on, then I'll try to block off time to write. And I find generally that I do best when I have like a couple of hours to really like get into a flow. I can write, and I have written in 1 hour blocks, but I really find that for me, the best thing for me to do is to start off doing something that inspires me. So if it's, you know, if I'm writing something, I might want to read or watch something that's in that genre, not so that I can copy it, but so that I can get into sort of that frame of mind and just sort of get excited and ready to tackle something like that. And you know, I'll maybe spend like 20 to 30 minutes doing something like that just to like get the juices flowing. And then I'll sit down and I'll write, and it depends on what I'm doing, what I'm writing. You know, I might, if I'm plotting, then I'm probably writing longhand in a notebook. And very often I'll sit down and I'll be like, I have no idea what's going to happen in this story, but I'll just sit down and just start free writing and free associating until I tell the complete story from beginning to end. And then, you know, usually I always like to compare it to Eddie Van Halen used to say that playing a guitar solo was like falling down the stairs and landing on your feet. And that's sort of how I feel about writing stories, is that I start out with like no plan, and then it's like you're just falling down the stairs, but then eventually you land on your feet and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I did tell a story. And maybe I could go back and I could set up some things a little bit better, or I could bring out this aspect a little bit more. And so then I'll move to like rewriting, where I'll then get on the computer and I will rewrite the plot and kind of shape that up. And then, so for instance, like the thing I'm working on now, like I would send that plot off to my editor and get his thoughts on it, and then at that point kind of start breaking it down into what the issue is going to look like, what's going to happen on each page. And yeah, so depending on what part of that process I'm in, sort of determines how much time I allot for that, what I do during that time. But I usually like to write in a room that I don't do other things in. So like if like right now I'm talking to you in my office and I have my computer here, and this is where I'll do my lettering, or if I do any kind of freelance writing, or like not creative writing, but just like pay the bills, somebody's paying me to write their blog or whatever. I might do that here at this desk. Anything that feels kind of like worky and is for somebody else, I'll do in my office. But if it's creative and for me, I feel like I have to get out into another space that doesn't have that like officey feel. So I'll usually, like if it's the summer, I'll go outside and sit out, in the shade, or I might go to like the room where the TV is, where I might watch an episode of something that might inspire me, and then I'll sit. I've got like a little comfy chair that I like to read in, so I'll sit in that chair and I'll write. And then it's like, I'll break for meals. I'll make sure I get exercise, because I feel like that's important, that you've got to move your body and get your blood flowing to be creative. So whether that's like walking the dog for an hour or doing Les Mills on the Roku. And then, always trying to make time for family and doing things with family every day. Depending on how much I have on my plate, I might be back at the computer after dinner. But otherwise I try to take off and have a free evening. But no 2 days are really the same. I'd love to get into a groove, and some days, I might have 2 or 3 days in a row where I really get into a groove doing something. But then just the nature of my work, there's always something throwing a monkey wrench in it.
I guess just as long as you have your morning coffee, then you can tackle anything.
That's the key. That's the important thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Before the podcast, you mentioned that your kids will be on summer vacation soon. I mean, that's obviously going to impact your workload.
Yeah, I'm that's always tough. I always think I'm going to get more done in the summer than I do. So this summer I've kind of readjusted expectations. So Nightmare Theater, those books I think are arriving on Wednesday. It's like 92 boxes of Nightmare Theater. And I've got to get those sent out. My goal is to get them all sent out by the end of June. So I've really kind of set that as my task for the month of June. And like, if I get other things done, great. But that's going to be, just from a personal creative standpoint, most of my other creative stuff is going to be put on hold while I take care of that. And then whatever else client stuff I have going on. But with my kids being out of school, I like to joke that they're interning in the Fried Comics shipping and receiving department. And we just fulfilled another Kickstarter, and they were still in school, but it was virtual school. So like they still had plenty of free time. So they were actually a really big help. So I'm looking forward to having them pitch in. And then I'm just planning to take some of July off, just having a scheduled vacation. And then I'll really probably dive back into the intense creative stuff once they go back to school.
Nice. Well, I hope you have a productive but fun summer.
Here's hoping.
Right. I guess we'll take a break and do a thunder round, which is our round of random questions. My first question is, if you could describe yourself with one word, what would it be?
I can only think of two words: unusual and normal. I couldn't pick one. I'm sorry.
No worries.
They're contrasts.
um, Now you sort of touched on this, kind of, but like a basketball player shooting countless free throws when they're not playing, consistently practicing your craft makes you better. As a creative involved in a lot of various artistic endeavors, what does practice look like for you?
Practice just looks like constantly doing something. And sometimes that's working outside of your comfort zone. I'm working on a book right now that I'm writing that is it's not at all like the other fried stuff. It's in fact what you might call normal. It's just straight up sword and sorcery, which is a genre that I didn't naturally come to, but I've come to love through all of my research. And um, and so like I think you practice, like you keep doing things in your strengths that play to your strengths, but you have to kind of practice the stuff that doesn't come naturally to you. And so for me, this new project, whether or not it's successful, I hope it is, but whether or not it's successful, for me, it's like stretching out and trying something new and just doing something different and using different muscles. And I think that's key. I think that's key. You gotta build up those other muscles too, while still keeping the stuff that you're already good at, up to snuff too.
That's a good point. I think for some reason this flashed in my head, but I'm right-handed, but I'm sort of reminiscing about the times when I used to hang out with the friends, randomly and just on the fly. I think
Uh-huh.
we were at a sushi joint one time, and I said, you know what, I'm going to practice using chopsticks with my left hand. And
Ooh.
just
Yeah.
I don't know why that
Yeah.
popped in my head, but must be because I'm hungry or something. And also, oh,
Maybe now I want sushi. But
all
yeah,
right,
yeah, sometimes you got to eat the sushi with your left hand. You got
right.
to use the chopsticks with your left hand.
um, if you were president of the United States, what kind of artwork would you hang up in the Oval Office?
So first of all, probably with the books that I make, I will never be elected president. But if I were, what kind of art would I hang up? Probably comic book art. I love comics, and I love I love art of all kinds, but I think if I could be the president that brings more awareness to comic books and how much of an art form it truly is, then great, that'd be awesome.
What would be the first one that you would hang up?
Well, probably because I'm still a kid at heart. I'd probably have to go with something by George Perez.
Hmm,
Um, that dude, like, I was just blown away by his work as a kid. So probably something from him, maybe some Neil Adams. I should probably come up with somebody a little more contemporary. How about Fiona Staples? Her stuff is fantastic.
nice.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many great people, but I'd probably try to get some original comic art all over all over the West Wing if I could.
That'd be cool. Let's see here. Oh, uh, little known fact for myself. I grew up watching General Hospital.
Oh
Um,
yeah,
what was it like working on a soap opera?
fun. I miss that a whole lot. So I worked on As the World Turns and All My Children and One Life to Live, and I had recurring roles on all three, but I was not signed to a contract. I was not a contract player, so I could bounce around between the three, and so I'd work on each one several days a month, and those are some of my fondest memories. Like I loved eating in the ABC commissary and being on a soundstage. I'm just an old like one of my earliest memories is being at the library and they were putting on a puppet show, and like I didn't care about the puppet show at all, but I wanted to see how they did it. And I got up and I walked behind the puppet stand and got into a ton of trouble for doing that. But I like seeing how the entertainment sausage is made, and so for me, just being on a soundstage was a big thrill, and to be paid work on these shows that had been on the air forever. Like As the World Turns was on the air for 50 years. And I still can't believe they canceled it. But I was on the second to last episode. I still have the vest that my character wore. I was a bartender on that show named Lloyd at the Lakeview Lounge. So I always say he's like Gunther from Friends, you know, so like he's not one of the main friends, but he's always there and you know, interacts with them. And you know, it was a cool feeling, and those people were all like, they were like a family. And I'm still in touch with some of the people from the show, and my wife worked on the show on As the World Turns behind the scenes. And you know, all those people that worked on those shows, like they put on a show 5 days a week. You know, that's tough. That's not easy to do. And I'm just sort of in awe of it. And I try to take some of the lessons that I saw, you know, the writers, like how the writers worked on those shows, and I try to apply those to my own writing now. Like those days are just really stuck with me. So I loved it. I loved it.
Cool. What fictional universe would you want to be a character in?
Ooh. You mean like you want to know like a specific character, or like DC or Marvel?
Um,
Or does it matter? Do I make
it doesn't matter. You can
do I
be
make up
whatever.
the rules?
You can do. Yeah.
I mean, I would probably. I mean, this is tough because like I like reading about Batman. That's probably like my favorite superhero. I don't know that I'd want to live in that world though, because Gotham City is so bleak and horrible, and like you might run into the Joker. So maybe, I don't know. Maybe in that case, I might say I'd want to live in Superman's Metropolis, because everything's bright and shiny, and it's the city of the future, city of tomorrow, and Superman's going to take care of all your problems. So I'm going with Superman.
Nice. You've just completed a long day of voiceover work, plotted your next book, and played with your kids. What do you crave to eat?
What do I crave to eat? Well, I really love Indian food. So I right now and maybe this is just because I have a particular craving, but they have these. It's like the ABCD roll, so it's like a paneer, like tikka masala, and it's wrapped up in this delicious, like, I guess it's a naan bread. It's just so fantastic from this place that's actually near the comic book shop. So I will go to the comic shop, pick up comics, and then go pick up this ABCD roll from Kana Grill, and enjoy some delicious Indian food.
Nice. I wish there was an Indian food place near my local comic shop.
It's kind of perfectly located. It's great.
Nice. If you had the ability to time travel, who is someone that you would want to have a meal with, and where would you take this person to eat?
Ooh, who would I want to have a meal with? Well, I'd probably love to go visit, I don't know, let's say like 1984 David Lee Roth, maybe. And I'd take him to like maybe like the craziest. I would imagine he'd probably want to go to like a strip club with a buffet. And so I guess I'd take him there, and I would have him tell me all kinds of good rock star stories that maybe maybe the stuff that he can't really tell in the press. Did I just waste my time travel? Oh my God, I totally just wasted my time travel. Oh well.
You gave a tip on something to invest in last time you were on. I believe it was the VTSAX, the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. What's something that you would not invest in?
What would I not invest in? Well, it's funny you say that. Because I don't know that I'd invest in individual stocks. Like I know that's a big thing right now. I might get myself into trouble. saying this because actually my friend Dave is trying to get me to invest in some stocks, but I think I'm so cautious about investing in individual stocks. I'd rather just invest in the whole market.
Hmm.
Like the last time I followed a hot stock tip, I lost a few $100s. So I don't want to do that anymore. It was like it was presented to me as like, oh, this is a sure thing. You're just going to put in a couple $100 and like it's going to be 10 grand in a few days. Like you're all like it's all this is sure money. And it did not remotely go that way. So I guess I've always been skeptical about investing in individual stocks because I just don't think I'm savvy enough to time the market and pick the right thing. And so I'm gonna forgive me for giving a boring answer. I already gave the tip about VT Sax, but I'm gonna stick with my VT Sax. Sorry, Dave. Sorry, Dave.
That's totally awesome answer. I started sort of doing some initial research on investing myself, and I think I'm along the same lines as you.
Yeah.
I'll probably be playing conservative, be on some sort of 15-year plan, and just hopefully, if I play my cards right, just get to a certain level and just live off dividends or something like that.
Yeah, that is, I wish when I was younger that I had really known more about that.
Me too.
And yeah, and because like I had an IRA, like a Roth IRA, because I worked at a bank. I temped at a bank for a while in New York, and everybody convinced me to open up a Roth IRA. And like, I wish that I had fully funded it. I wish that I had thought more about how I would invest that money. Not saying I could be retired by now, but like I think I would be in better shape than I am now. But yeah, I that's cool that you say that because I do think that the stock market tends to go up over time, and if you can invest in the whole thing, that's probably a better bet than like picking one stock.
Hmm. You can leave that to the day traders, I guess.
I will leave it to the day traders. That's right.
um, if a movie was made about your life, what kind of music would be on the soundtrack?
I would think, that depends really. Like, because I grew up in the 80s, so it would probably be mostly 80s music. But I've been a guy that, like, all my life, I never liked to look back to, like, I was born at the tail end of the 70s. So I was born in 77. And so, but like, from the time I was conscious and like could remember anything, it's 80s pop culture that I remember. And I never liked looking back. I always thought like, oh, that's old stuff. But I'm really right now, I'm on a real 70s vibe, whether it's like 70s cinema or 70s comics or 70s music. Like I have Sirius XM and I can't even stand to listen to the 80s channel. I'm like, I've heard these songs a million times.
Right.
Let me, so I turn it to 70s on 7 and I'm in heaven, man. Like there's just something that I feel like the 70s music, it has so much soul, and it's also kind of like mellow in a way. Yeah, it's something that it just makes me happy. It just makes me happy. It's like soul food. So I'd probably lobby hard for 70s music.
Yeah, the arrangement is definitely different. Was definitely
Yeah,
different during the 70s.
you can really hear it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out on Sirius. Which
Yeah.
which channel was that again?
So it's 70s on 7.
70s
So
on
it's,
7.
yeah,
All
just
right.
channel 7. And it's great because they have like all the old DJs with the big DJ voice, and they don't sound like human beings, but they sound like they're announcers, and I sort of love that.
um, Now, who would play you in the movie, and who would you want to? Well, I guess you can maybe direct yourself, right?
Yeah, maybe I
Direct
could
it
play
yourself.
myself.
Yeah.
I would want. Oh boy, who would I want to play me? Would they have to look like me, or could they just be anybody like
Anybody that comes to mind.
Michael Cera?
Oh wow, interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he's such an interesting actor. And I think, so he's obviously younger than me, but if we were making a movie about a specific period of my life and he was the actor, I feel like he could capture the awkwardness that I constantly feel. So I think he'd do a good job of that.
So it'd be Clay Adams versus the world.
Yes, exactly.
Now, who would be a good director for this movie?
um, you know, I'd probably say I'd want somebody like who directed what was that Nicole Kidman movie where she plays the journalist, To Die For? Who was that? Was that Gus Van Sant? Who was
Uh,
that? I want somebody quirky. Um, is it cheating if I pull that up?
no, not at all.
I'm pulling it up on the old Google machine. Um, who directed this thing? Directed by Gus Van
All
Sant.
right. Yeah, you're right. I just pulled it up on IMDb.
Yeah, yeah. I like the stylish way that was told. So I don't know why that movie of all movies just popped into my head.
Uh-huh.
But it's the one that came up. I'd probably want something that was told in that like non-traditional way, like it wasn't just a straight narrative, but it just kind of like bounced around and had some different perspectives and really got like a fuller picture of the story. I'm also thinking of like I, Tanya. I think that kind of had a similar vibe. I feel like when they were making I, Tanya, they must have referenced To Die For
Mm,
in terms of the tone.
okay.
I think tonally that's something I'd go for. Whether or not Gus Van Sant directed it, I'd love that. I'd love that movie to be a reference point.
Got it. Um, what's one thing you hated as a child but love now as an adult?
Oh man, like everything. I was well. I've already mentioned '70s music and comics, but when I was a kid, well, okay. So for now, like I told you, I'm writing this sword and sorcery comic. I didn't care about fantasy. I didn't care about sword and sorcery. Like I watched He-Man, but it wasn't a thing that I was super into, and like I just couldn't get into fantasy the way that some of my friends were really into fantasy. I couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. And even as an adult, I kind of struggled. Like I watched Game of Thrones and I, like everybody else, I really loved it. I tried to read the books, but I have a really hard time, with devoting myself to a big massive tome, like that. And but I recently discovered the original Robert E. Howard Conan the Barbarian stories,
Mm,
and they're super short and they're really well written. Obviously they're a product of their time, and like anything like that, there are certain things that you kind of have to like ignore or gloss over to enjoy. But the prose is really good. The way he creates the story, the character he's created, the mythology that he's created. I've gotten super into Conan the Barbarian, and so I'm reading the stories and I'm reading the comics, and yeah, man, I love sword and sorcery now, and I could not stand it as a kid.
mm, interesting. I'll probably have to check out those Conan books.
Yeah, they're great. They're great.
If you're a college professor, what would you be teaching?
You know what? Honestly, I would probably be teaching writing or literature. My daughter keeps telling me that I need to go be like a college English professor, because I love reading. I love reading. I love communicating. I love the classics. Like I feel like it's important that we sort of keep a lot of this stuff alive because um, I'm like my kind of viewpoint is that like the trappings that we live in have changed, but human nature hasn't changed. Like there's really no problem that we're facing now at its core that somebody didn't face, 2,000 years ago or whatever. And so I really kind of think there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned from literature that's been written through the ages. And then also just like great writing is great writing. A great book is a great book. It doesn't matter when it was written. And the best stuff that has really stood the test of time is the stuff that you pick up. And to me, the Conan stuff is like that. The Robert E. Howard Conan stuff. It's like you pick it up and you're like, this could have been written today in some ways. Now, like I said, there are pieces of the Conan stuff that's like, okay, that's clearly, you know, a 1930s attitude, you know, but there are like just the way that the words are put together, the way the things are communicated. When you pick it up and you see a sentence that you're like, that doesn't feel like old timey writing. You know what I mean? Like there's an immediacy to it that feels like it could have been written yesterday. Like that, I think is super cool to find. And I like sharing stories with people. I like getting people excited about it. So I'd probably teach literature and then, you know, maybe on the side, teach some writing courses.
Mm. And seeing as how you just discovered Conan books recently, when you were younger, what book that you discovered made you become a fan of reading books?
I can tell you it was the big one. I mean, I read a bunch of stuff. Like I loved Roald Dahl. I loved Encyclopedia Brown, you know, as a kid. Ramona, all the Ramona books by Beverly Cleary.
Oh wow, yeah.
Those were all fantastic kid reads. And then I think what really set me off on genre was that I picked up, I was at like an outlet mall or something, and they had this Classics Illustrated version of Sherlock Holmes. And I picked that up and just absolutely fell in love with Sherlock Holmes. And I bought a big collection then of the original stories. And I remember my parents were like, that you're never gonna, like, this was written in the 1800s, you know, like you're in third grade, like you're not gonna understand what's going on. But I loved it. I devoured those Sherlock Holmes stories. And then, you know, several years after that, I discovered Agatha Christie at like a used book sale. My grandmother bought me all these old Agatha Christie books, and like they were all in terrible condition. I remember she like washed them, you know, like in soap and water. She washed the books, which I would be horrified by now. But
was it during the first pandemic 100 years ago?
It must have been. It must have been. And so I got my freshly scrubbed Agatha Christie books and totally fell in love with those too. And so I think that just like, it's Sherlock Holmes that really, I think, made me want to be a writer and fall in love with genre. That I just remember trying to write Sherlock Holmes stories, you know, in third grade and in that Arthur Conan Doyle style. And failing miserably, of course, but like that, I wanted to be an author because of Sherlock Holmes.
Nice. You played a bartender on As the World Turns. What's your favorite adult beverage?
So I like the old fashioned. But I don't like what a lot of people do. What a lot of bartenders do is they mash a lot of fruit in there, and I feel like that ruins it. So I do it with no fruit. It's just a sugar cube, some bitters, club soda. We got the bullet rye, and then stir that up and put in a big ice cube. I got the special ice cube maker that makes like these enormous
Wow.
these enormous ice cubes, and you just drop one of those in there, and man, I'll go to town. That's my drink.
Nice. I could actually just drink bullet rye on the rocks myself.
Right? Yeah,
it's pretty good.
It's some good stuff.
And my last question for the Thunder Round is, I gave you $1 million last time you were on, and you made the Bare Naked Ladies song go away miraculously. So, what would you do if I gave you $1 billion?
$1 billion. If you gave me $1 billion, well, let's see. So the Bare Naked Ladies song is already gone. It's funny that song came on the I laughed because the song came on the radio the other day, and my wife cranked it up, and she's like, "I can't believe you hate this song." If you gave me $1 billion, I mean, nobody needs $1 billion. I'd probably, of course, I'd want to make sure that my oxygen mask was on before I started helping other people with their oxygen masks. So, I'd want to make sure that my basic needs were going to be taken care of. And then I'd give it away. I'd invest in different charities. I'd probably back a whole lot more Kickstarters. I'd love to support the arts. Um, because one of the things that I like, I think it's super easy to criticize corporations, and I think they deserve a lot of the criticism that they get. So don't get me wrong. But, it's also important to understand that like NPR is largely funded by the McDonald's fortune. It's Joan Kroc using Ray Kroc's fortune from McDonald's to support NPR.
Mm-hmm.
Walmart does they support a lot of arts. Like I said, they built a world-class art museum that like you'd never find in Arkansas. Before you'd have to travel to New York to find a museum of this quality. And now it's just in the middle of Northwest Arkansas, and anybody can come to it free. And so I think I would probably make sure that there's a portion of my money that went to things like that that allowed people to have access to the arts, that supported artists, because let's face it, artists are very often overworked and underpaid, and I would want them to feel appreciated and loved, and they would know that they could do their work and eat. And then, of course, I would want to support some other charities too or I would not other charities that supported people who were just less fortunate. They didn't get the right breaks in life, and could use a roof over their head or food on the table.
Awesome. The next segment of the podcast is superhero shoutouts. Is there a person or group of people that has helped you along the way that you'd like to say thank you to?
Absolutely. So I already mentioned Tyler James, and I may even, if you asked this last time, I may have even said that, but it bears repeating. I think Tyler's podcast is fantastic. Comics Launch, his courses, his Comics Launch course and communities. He's really built up a great community. And so the community within the greater community within Comics Launch is fantastic. Everybody supports each other and really, really helps each other out. It's just such a great community. So if you're not familiar with what Tyler does, I think you should check it out. I would not be sitting here running my 10th Kickstarter campaign without him, and they've all been successful. I guess 11 if you count Nightmare Theater. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without him. So definitely check out Tyler James. And then Dave, forgive me if you're listening to this, since I'm not taking your investment advice, I do want to give you a shout out and let you know, that people should check out your work. So this is David Schrader. He's my co-editor on Nightmare Theater. I think Dave's a guy I've known for a long time. I'm sure we talked about this the last time.
Right.
I acted in a film that he produced and wrote, and I think maybe even I think he was the co-director. Dave's just a guy who makes stuff. He is the classic definition of the word producer. He's got a million ideas. He makes them happen. And he puts them out into the world, and yeah, I think people should check out his stuff. Baby Badass from Action Lab. He's got another book coming out soon that we're going to publish through Bloodline, which put out Nightmare Theater. So it's called Cannibals on Mars. So look for that. And he's got a film coming. I don't know that he's talked about this, but he's got a film coming up. Oh, and you should also check out his movie NoHo, which is on, you can stream it on Amazon Prime if you're a member. And it's the 25th anniversary edition, because there's like another movie called NoHo. But I have to say, like, honest to God, I put this movie on like just to support Dave, and I put it on in the background, and I loved it. I started like the whole idea was that I was just gonna put it on so I could watch it like while doing something else, but I found myself like not doing anything and just
Right.
cracking up at this movie, and I literally watched it 2 days in a row because I was like, once it was over, I was like, okay, I need to make sure like I have no distractions. I want to watch this from beginning to end, and it was a cool little slacker comedy from the 90s that I think people should check out.
Hmm. I'll definitely have to add that to
Yeah,
my
yeah.
queue. Um, is there an artist, writer, or other creative that you'd like our audience to check out?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are so many great people putting out books now through Scout or Behemoth is another great company. Um, so I would encourage I'd encourage people to pick up any of those books. And from either of those companies, I think you can't go wrong. One book though that I read, if I just had to like pick one, and I jumped the gun on your question, so I probably should have saved Dave for this one, but um, I just read a book called Knock 'em Dead from Aftershock Comics, and I can't quite remember who drew it. The artist was fantastic. I'm gonna have to look it up, but the writer was a guy named, and I'm probably going to mispronounce his name, Elliot Rahal, Rahal. And I was really knocked out by this. This comic knocked me dead, as it, I guess. But it's about it's about like a stand-up comedian who like gets possessed by the spirits of other stand-up comedians. Like it was so like different from other comics I had read, and it had kind of like an interesting structure. Like each comic sort of like told, I mean, it all told one big story, but each comic was each issue was a satisfying chunk, and it was just so super cool. And if you're like it's not about comedy, you don't have to know anything. Like it's not necessarily a funny book. It's more of like a horror book, but it's but like if you're a fan of stand-up comedy, like who Lenny Bruce is, or like you like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or something. I mean, this is not like that, but the way that Marvelous Mrs. Maisel sort of deals with the history of stand-up comedy, this was sort of like a horror comic that did that, and I thought that was super cool. So it's Elliot Rahal, and the artist is Matt. Is this another Italian name? Mattia. I don't know. Mattia Monaco is the artist name, and the art was just perfect for the book. It's really not Knock 'em Dead from Aftershock Comics. So check it out.
Cool. Switching back to your projects,
Yeah.
is there anything else that you'd like to say about your current Kickstarter, or are there any other projects that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so the book I'm working on right now, the Sword and Sorcery book, we should be kickstarting at the in the fall, and we've made that our stretch goal actually for PBOW. If we reach 6,900, which would make this the best Kickstarter for PBOW and for this for this creative team. If we reach that, we're going to unlock a special preview of this book, this Sword and Sorcery book, and it's like I said, it's very different from the other Fried stuff, but I'm having a great time with it. The artist is Kyle Roberts, and he is just killing it. And I literally came up with this concept just so Kyle could draw Sword and Sorcery, because I saw he was doing all this fantasy stuff just in his sketchbooks. And I was like, this guy needs to be doing a Sword and Sorcery book. So let me try to come up with something. And he was like, yeah, I'd love to do some short stories. And I was like, okay, great. Here's my Bible on a 7-issue miniseries. Each issue is going to be 24 pages. But he was all in. He was all in. He was like, look, this is going to take me forever to draw. But if you can be patient, I would love to draw this. And I said, let's do it. Let's do it. So the book is called Blazing Blade of Frankenstein. And it takes so my favorite character in literature is Frankenstein. So we're casting this as a sequel to that novel. I won't go into too many details here because it's early days. It's not going to come out to the fall, but it casts Frankenstein as Conan the Barbarian.
Wow.
So it's gothic horror meets sword and sorcery, and the art is just gorgeous.
Can't wait for that one. That sounds so interesting.
Yeah, coming this fall.
All right. Where can people find you online?
You can find my work at friedcomics.com, or I'm always on Twitter at Clay's Evil Twin.
Clay's Evil Twin. That sounds interesting. How did you come up with that moniker?
I think my wife suggested it. I don't even know. I was like, I gotta come up with a name. I don't know. Because I think probably like my name was taken, and then it was like every variation. There are all these Clay Adams out there. There's like a medical supply company named after a guy named Clay Adams. And then there's like, I guess there's like some singer-songwriter named Clay Adams. Anyway, there are a few of them out there. And so I guess I tried to put in my name, and it was like, this is taken. And then like you put a number after it, and it's like, yeah, that's taken too. And it was like, everything was taken. And I was like, what the hell is my name going to be? And I think she was like, oh, it's Clay's Evil Twin. Okay, that works for me.
Before I let you go, I usually ask our guests to give a parting piece of advice that our audience could grab a hold of and make some incremental changes to whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
So you gave some really good advice about writing and Kickstarter campaigns earlier. What's some helpful piece of advice you could give for someone that wants to get into voice acting?
For somebody who wants to get into voice acting, I would say just take acting lessons, because it's not necessarily about having a great voice. I mean, knowing how to use your voice is great, but the real thing is that it is acting. And so I've heard a lot of people, will come up to me and say like, everybody says I have a great voice, I should be doing voiceovers. And it's like, well, it's not really about that, because like, I was joking earlier about the announcers on 70s on 7, like they don't really go for that big announcery voice anymore. It really is just about acting and how can you relate to other people. And very often it's like you're having to relate to people who aren't even there. Like I did whole seasons of cartoons where I wasn't interacting with anybody, and you have to act like you are. You have to anticipate, what cues they might give you and then respond to it. And then, you have to really use your imagination to visualize all this crazy stuff that might be happening on screen that like isn't necessarily apparent on the page. So I would just say take acting classes, and especially I would say improv, because besides just being like great for life, I think improv is probably one of the most important things you can take as an actor, just to learn how to respond to people and react to people and stay present in the scene and really listen. And that's becoming a skill that is required more and more for, say, like commercials. You might be asked to improvise a little bit, and so you should be comfortable doing that. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing, and then just know that like, for instance, I did a lot of animation voiceover, and that's really tough to break into. So understand that going in. And don't be upset if it doesn't happen for you right away, that it just it takes a while to break in. But then once you get that first job, it's like work begets work.
That's really good advice. I think your advice about taking improv classes is interesting because, I mean, if you sort of scale it, it can lend itself to a lot of other things. I mean, especially now during the pandemic when life is totally different. being able to pivot and
Yes.
having that sort of foresight to try something to put you in a better position to succeed. Knowing when you should probably change course in something. I think those are really important skill sets.
Yeah, for sure. And then also like it's all about like taking what you're given and making something out of it, right? Like so the big rule of improv is yes and. So you don't negate what somebody else just said, you accept it and you add to it. And I think that's such a great philosophy for life. And that it's also sort of like, the last year we've been dealt a hand, and probably the healthiest way to deal with it is to say, yes, this is what this is, and here's what I'm going to do about it. And so, yeah, I think those skills are really just great for life.
Definitely. Well, Clay, it's been awesome having you back on the podcast. Once you get ready to promote Blazing Blade of Frankenstein, please let me know. It'd be great to have you on for that.
Yeah, I will. I'd love to come back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for listening to the Hall 8 Show podcast, and thanks to my guest, Clay Adams, for coming back on the show to promote PBOW World War Bitch 1 and 2, now on Kickstarter until June 17th, 2021. We love putting the spotlight on independent pop culture creatives. If you have a suggestion for a potential guest, please let us know. You can find this podcast basically anywhere where you listen to podcasts. You can also check it out on our website, hall-h.com. If you believe in our mission to be the voice of independent creators, we'd appreciate a rating, hopefully 5 stars, and a comment on Apple Podcasts. And please spread the word on social media using the hashtag HallHShow. Peace, cheers, and stay safe out there.